This is the
Five Stars
podcast.
Let me talk to you.
Hi.
So, what do you guys want to talk about? Tell me we're not telling lies.
Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Still not caught up on sleep. Still incredibly sore from the past week. But I made it back to Ohio in one piece. The Friday show was uploaded a day late, but hey, at least you got one. That's kind of my approach at this point. Not really proud of the way the recordings came out, but I was running on fumes to begin with. But we got more pro wrestling to cover this weekend, and that's what we're here to do. Today we're going to talk about the WWE Backlash event from Saturday night. We'll hit WWF Retro Raw as well. It's a regular FSWR podcast with about half the energy and half the brain power. I'm hoping to make a full recovery so I can get back in the gym this week and start working out again. You know, it's crazy, but when I miss out on a few workout sessions throughout the week, it just totally kills my vibe. You know, even if I could have physically worked out in the past week, I don't know how long my body would have held up. The work was just way too taxing. I know it's just a bundle of excuses. All the people that I follow on YouTube would tell me to suck it up and do it anyway. No. I'll take the heat. In any case, this is the Five Starr Wrestling Report. We are the wrestling podcast nobody knows but everybody needs. Here on YouTube and Rumble on Mondays and Fridays to bring you great, exhilarating classic wrestling coverage. No. I don't know about the great or exhilarating part, but I try. Make sure you subscribe, comment, give the show a like. Come back and check us out every week for new content, new material. And like I said, we got two things to cover this week, or this weekend. And I also have another handful of things that I need to do, so let's try to get these recordings out of the way so I can prep for everything else. Like cooking meals. Because unfortunately I have to do that at some point as well. So I don't know how long-winded I'm going to get with this WrestleMania Backlash review. Or is it just Backlash now? Wasn't it WrestleMania Backlash last year? Whatever. The point is, I watched the show on Saturday night. I didn't really have that many overall thoughts about the show. There were things I liked, things I didn't. You know, it was kind of the usual grab bag I'd come to expect with a WWE show in 2025. I mean, I guess the one thing that really stood out was the quick turnaround period between WrestleMania 41 and the Backlash PLE. What was it, 3 weeks? I mean, I know WrestleMania was a lot later this year, but man, 3 weeks between those two shows. it just seems kind of sudden. And this wasn't like a house show type event either. It was a regular standard premium live special. They had 5 matches in total. And I did in fact watch all 5, believe it or not. Including the girls' match, which wound up being the biggest surprise for me. And I do not mean that in a condescending demeanor. To me, overall, the show is just kind of meh. Maybe that's not entirely fair. I think because the main event was so lousy, that was my lingering impression after they faded to black. There wasn't anything on the card that originally sparked my intrigue. Pat McAfee and Gunther was kind of eye-catching at first. But I think a lot of the selling point was the John Cena Randy Orton title match. The final encounter, so to speak. Even though I could easily make a joke about all the other times they claimed it was going to be the final time. Then they wrestled half a dozen more matches over the years. Well, I'll just save my thoughts for the Cena-Orton match when we get there. First, I'm going to touch on this opening 4-way for the United States title. What wound up being one of the better multi-mans I've seen in quite some time. And most of y'all know my opinions on 3-ways and 4-ways in wrestling. Not going to sit here and automatically say, oh, it's the greatest 4-way I've ever seen. But I liked it a hell of a lot more than I thought I would. The match is Jacob Fatu versus Drew McIntyre versus Damian Priest versus LA Knight. Yeah. I guess they had originally booked this to be a 3-way and decided, well, we need to get Drew McIntyre on the card somehow, so let's throw him in there. I will concede, when you book a multi-man with actual star power, it tends to stand out a lot more than, say, doing the same thing with a bunch of middle card guys that aren't over. You know, we've seen that plenty of times in recent memory too, and those are usually my dedicated piss break segments. I mean, there were definitely some innovative move sequences in this match, if you want to call it that. Everyone worked hard. I like all 4 of these guys as individual talents. It's interesting how they basically shoehorned 2 previous singles rivalries into one match and kind of doing layered stories in that way. At the same time, it kind of looks like they're still running with the Priest-McIntyre feud, which I'm not super stoked about because I really didn't dig their Mania match to begin with. But like I said, there was some good stuff here. I do have a random question, though. Why does everybody have to point before they run now? Is that just a modern thing that I've completely neglected throughout the years? Everybody always points in the direction they're about to run, as if we need to approve of it first. I saw Drew do that early on here, and I'm like, God, why does everybody point in wrestling now? It's like the boys were watching Kenny Omega film at one point, decided, yeah, that looks cool. Let's all point to our opponent and telegraph something we're about to do. And everybody got their quote-unquote 5 minutes in the limelight on offense. I actually kind of like the spot where McIntyre did the sit-up and heaved Fatu onto Knight from out of the corner. Then Fatu basically had a big flurry of offense onto all 3 guys. That was really creative. Obviously, they wanted to get over that Priest and McIntyre still have beef with each other. So when Priest cost McIntyre the pin attempt at one point, and they started brawling out into the crowd, you pretty much knew at that point that Fatu was retaining. They did the deal where Priest gave McIntyre the South of Heaven chokeslam off the staging platform through some electrical equipment, basically as a means of writing them both out. And then as LA Knight tried to lay Fatu over the announce table, he teases he's going to go up and give him the big elbow drop. But then Solo Sikoa shows up and helps to save Fatu. And they had some really solid camera work here as Knight was going around stalking Solo. Made you think he was going to get his hands on him. But then you see a guy reach out from over the barricade and level Knight with a clothesline. Turns out to be Jeff Cobb. And I thought that run-in worked well. I had heard the rumors that he was set to debut eventually. I just wasn't entirely sure how they would have fit him into everything they're booking currently. You know, the Bloodline stuff has taken such a back seat to everything. I just kind of presumed they were quietly trying to phase a lot of that stuff out. But I guess they're still doing the slow burn tease of breaking Jacob Fatu away from Solo's clutches, so to speak. The Jeff Cobb affiliation might give it a little more longevity in the interim. Maybe with the possibility of Bronson Reed making his return soon, which I also heard was something that could be happening. I mean, he's been out since what? The War Games match last year? When he broke his foot or broke his ankle doing that asinine dive off the top of the cage. Hopefully he learned his lesson from all that. So we'll see where it goes. Fatu retaining at the end was a pretty safe bet. Him being confused about everything going on with Solo and Cobb left some interesting open-ended questions. So I'm not going to entirely poo-poo on this, even though the Bloodline story is really kind of running on gimped legs at this point. They might be able to drag it out to SummerSlam and build to some big blow-off with Solo and Fatu in a singles match over the strap. But I really don't know how much longer they'll be able to go against the grain with Fatu as a heel. He's already getting mostly babyface reactions in his matches, but he's still clinging onto Solo's group and hasn't officially flipped yet. So we'll see how long they try to prolong it. But it was a relatively good start to the show. And they follow that with the Women's Intercontinental Championship match. It's Becky Lynch challenging Lyra Valkyrie. Or Valkyria. Whatever her goddamn name is. I still don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know I don't have the best memory. Did we not just see these two teaming together at WrestleMania a month ago and winning the tag straps from Liv and Raquel? Somehow within the span of 3 weeks, in addition to them losing the belts, Becky also seemingly turned heel from out of the blue for no particular reason. All right, fine, whatever, just trying to get my facts straight. Also, what in the hell is Lyra's gimmick supposed to be? That she's a bird? Is she a sponsor for Red Bull now? I've heard through the grapevine that Red Bull gives you wings. I'm assuming that's how she came to grow those giant bird feathers she came out with. Getting those minor gripes out of the way. Remember how I was talking about this match being the big surprise in the show for me? Well, it was. It was surprisingly the best match on the PLE. Didn't see that coming. I'm still of the opinion that Becky Lynch is way too fucking skinny. The human body needs enough mass to be able to cushion the landings on all the bumps these guys and girls take. Man, every time I see Becky bump, I cringe. I'm just like, she looks like her bones could break at any minute. She's a good heel. I still don't entirely understand the logic of having her return as a babyface only to flip her heel less than 3 weeks after the fact. But I've seen Becky work both sides of the fence. She's great at it. That's not the issue I have. The issue is that she looks brittle and scrawny. And I just worry she's going to get hurt. And this was honestly the first time I've really watched a Lyra match closely. I know she's wrestled before. I've probably seen some of her stuff in passing, but I was never really watching all that intently. She's obviously really green, but she's very impressive athletically. I can see why WWE would want to put stock in her as one of the younger stars they're trying to develop. I thought this was a really good match. Like an excellent match. And I genuinely mean that. This was one of the best women's matches I can recall in recent memory. I know people were really high on that three-way with Bianca, Io, and Rhea the other month. I thought this was way better. Maybe it's my personal taste. My general animosity when it comes to booking multi-person matches now. But seriously, this is really good. I think both Lyra and Becky should be really proud of this one. And to me, it wasn't even so much about the moves or even the length of the match, because it did go a while. I just really enjoyed the overall story they told, where Lyra was one step ahead of Becky the entire way, and every time Becky would hit Lyra with one of her signature moves or try to use some underhanded tactic to cheat, Lyra would keep fighting back. And they did a great job capturing Becky's frustration with all that. You know, they did rely pretty heavily on the near falls, and on general principle, I've never been a fan of spamming kickouts in wrestling. I think it's overplayed, and a lot of the time it just winds up killing people's finishers. I guess Becky's actual finish is the Fujiwara armbar, and not so much the manhandle slam, which is basically a modified rock bottom. So I didn't really have an issue with Lyra kicking out of that. If the end goal here was to spotlight Lyra and show that she can hang with all the top women in the division, this is a great step in moving her in that direction. I mean, it was one of the first times I've actually seen one of these newbie NXT call-ups make a good impression. This is probably an unpopular opinion, but I don't give a shit. I see way more potential in Lyra than I do Tiffany Stratton. The only thing I see in Tiffany is a 25-year-old that has more Botox injections than a middle-aged single mom from the Bronx. So I'll take Lyra over Tiffy any day of the week. And I even like the post-match deal where after Lyra pinned Becky with some kind of modified cradle hold, Becky immediately sprang back up and went after Lyra to get some heat back on herself. Put her in the armbar submission. For the record, yes, I'm aware that she calls the move the disarm her. So silly. But at the end of the day, Lyra just outsmarted Becky and found a way to win. She outworked her. It was a classic Mr. Wrestling 2 Magnum TA story where the young hot prospect finds a way to beat the experienced veteran when the veteran goes in underestimating the rookie. It's not really rocket science. You know, we've seen that story done plenty of times in wrestling over time. You just need to have the right kind of talent to put in that position. So I'm genuinely looking forward to seeing what they do with Becky and Lyra. Obviously, the feud has to continue based on the afterbirth they did here. I still don't particularly give much of a crap about the Women's Intercontinental title. Didn't even really register to me at any point that this was supposed to be a title match. With that said, if they're trying to make that belt actually mean anything, having Becky go after the belt is a lot more enticing than a fucking Chelsea Green or any of these other mid-level girls that WWE tries to force on everybody. But I don't want to get tied up in that rant. Really good stuff here. I would definitely say this qualifies for a top match of the year on my list. See, I don't hate women's wrestling. I just hate really bad women's wrestling, which is unfortunately a lot more common than the good stuff these days. But yeah, nothing but good things to say about that. I can't exactly say the same held true for Penta versus Dirty Dom. This men's IC title match was pretty mid, if I'm being honest. I'm still yet to be proven otherwise when it comes to my take on Penta and or Rey Fenix. Out of the gate, WWE's already done a much better job in making Penta actually stand out as any type of attraction. And when he was in AEW being relegated to pointless six-mans every week, there was nothing unique about Penta's presentation during that time. He was just like every other generic spot monkey on that program. With that said, I'm just still not really feeling it with Penta. You know, he came in with all this hype and all this fanfare. He had that decent TV match with Chad Gable, and that's pretty much where he's peaked. I think he was wasted in that four-way at WrestleMania. You know, the fact that he became just a body on that show instead of actually being given a single showcase, that was a huge blown opportunity. And then you get to this match with Dom. They're obviously throwing all their eggs in the Dirty Dom basket now. Whatever the end game is with him in the Judgment Day, I can't believe this shit's still going on. They're obviously leaning in the direction of a face turn. They've even got Michael Cole now openly putting him over on commentary. And that was considered blasphemy just a couple years ago. But now you hear him complimenting Dom's growth in the ring, that he's improved immensely in terms of his comfort on television and being a natural on-screen personality. And that I agree with. The best career move they ever made with Dom Mysterio is turning him heel. And I think the chemistry he's built with Liv, while not necessarily my cup of tea, they seem to have gotten themselves over as an oddball heel couple on television. Or whatever Dom nicknames Liv now. What the hell did Michael Cole call her in this match? Soft cakes? You know, referring to her assets. emphasis on ass. It's very on the nose, but it works to a degree. They're heels. They're supposed to be obnoxious and over the top. Getting back to Penta, though, for a minute. The problem right now is that they have him. They're spotlighting him. But they're not giving him much to work with outside of, let's just book Penta on the card. You know, at the same time he's been roped into the IC title picture, it hasn't really been done with the focus being put on him. He's just the guy that winds up doing the job. And they apparently had already jobbed him out the Dom on television prior to this. And they did it again here. I mean, it's hard to really explain it without narrowing the conversation down to this. Yes, he has a unique look. Yes, he's already selling a shit ton of merchandise for the WWE, which I know is primarily the only thing they care about. But other than the gimmick itself, what are they doing right now to make Penta actually matter as an on-screen talent? Because so far, they're not booking him like he matters. That's the problem I have. I don't even know if him winning the IC title would really fix that issue. Is there a particular reason they're not having him and Phoenix be a tag team? They're both under contract now, but they're wrestling on totally separate brands, and they haven't had any interaction together on TV. I just find that incredibly bizarre. WWE's tag division sucks. I don't think anybody would dispute that. Unless you're a diehard sheep that praises everything this company does. They need tag teams. I don't see what the holdup is in having Penta and Phoenix go after the tag straps. I mean, they only got, what, 3 different sets of tag belts? If you include the NXT ones. The competition is not all that tough. Like I said before, this match really didn't do a whole lot for me. They did a bunch of lucha spots. There was a bunch of smoke and mirrors with the Judgment Day at the end where Carlito tried to run a distraction so Finn Balor and JD McDonald could take out Penta. But then Balor hesitated with the chair and ended up screwing his guys over because the ref caught them. Then Penta sailed out and took all the flunkies out. And I forget, something else happened that caused a ref distraction. And it led to Chad Gable showing up dressed as El Grande Americano so he could hit Penta with the loaded mask. And then Dom capitalized and hit a frog splash for the pin. Definitely overbooked by the end. And that wasn't the only match on the show that was overbooked all to hell. I mean, you can see they've obviously got plans when it comes to Dom splitting away from the Judgment Day. Very much in a similar vein to what they're doing right now with Jacob Fatu and the Bloodline. But I'm in the same boat I am with the Bloodline story. I'm kind of sick of the Judgment Day stuff. The group itself is a joke. If they're building to Balor and Dom and some kind of singles blow-off, they need to quit stalling and just fucking get there already. Because all this intermediary stuff with the flunkies running distraction spots and teasing breakups without actually ever doing anything, it's been dragged out for far too long. I got no qualms with them wanting to keep the belt on Dom. But they need to rapidly shift gears with the Judgment Day stuff. Because, It's run its course. Anyway, let's talk about Gunther and Pat McAfee. It actually hit me here, right as McAfee was making his ring entrance. When was the last time McAfee worked a match in WWE? It's been well over 2 years now, right? When did he wrestle Austin Theory? That was WrestleMania 3 years ago? Has he worked a match since that point? If he has, I don't recall what show that would have taken place at. If you think about it, considering how long McAfee's worked for WWE, both as a talent and as a commentator, he's someone that dates all the way back to when WWE was still running Full Sail with NXT. Wasn't his first match against Adam Cole? Back when Cole was actually someone worth giving a shit about? So yeah, McAfee's been around for a while. He hasn't really wrestled that many matches. Maybe I'm just misremembering what he looked like before physically, but I surely don't recall him looking as out of shape as he did for this match. Not that I was expecting him to show up looking like Rick Rude or Lex Luger with washboard abs. But Jesus Christ, dude. Take some pride. Couldn't at least shave your chest or show up with a reasonable looking tan of some description? Again, I know he's primarily a commentator now, but can you try to clean yourself up just a little bit? Especially if you're going to wrestle without a shirt on. So I never really got the chance to watch any of the clips in the build-up to this. From what I gathered, there was a segment they shot the night after WrestleMania where McAfee and Cole were giving Gunther a hard time on commentary. And I guess Gunther had attacked them both and ended up choking out McAfee with a sleeper hold. It seemed like an odd program for them to do right after Gunther had dropped the World Heavyweight title to Jey Uso. And now they got him feuding with the color commentator on the flagship show. Not really what I would have expected. But as a buffer feud, or I guess you could call it a bounce back feud to keep Gunther on top but not directly involve him with the main championship, it's not the worst idea they could come up with. You could definitely tell that Pat McAfee hadn't been hitting the treadmill all that frequently as of late. That motherfucker was blowed up by the end of this thing. That rope running was like Shane McMahon levels of laughably bad. And again, I already touched on the physique thing. I wasn't really impressed with the way Pat showed up here for his appearance. But I think overall this ended up working in more ways than one. I mean, Gunther is an absolute mastermind when it comes to working as the mean bully heel. He went in there and pretty much destroyed Pat McAfee. I don't even think it was close. I mean, yeah, they gave Pat a few hope spots here and there, but it was very much a one-sided beatdown from start to finish. Gunther absorbed most of Pat's offense. Anytime they did slap exchanges, Gunther just fired back and laid into Pat even harder. I wasn't the biggest fan of Michael Cole getting involved. I was more or less okay with the biased babyface commentary because that kind of came with the territory based on what Gunther had already done to him prior on television. But like the stuff with him tripping up Gunther's foot and trying to help Pat steal the win, him getting physically pulled into the ring and Gunther teasing he was going to powerbomb him, that I wasn't really on board with. Mostly in the fact that I was smart enough to know that Michael Cole's not taking bumps at his age. So even the idea of teasing it was enough to make me think, like, come on, this is bullshit. Other than the stuff with Cole, it was a well-worked match with a lot of good physicality. Gunther's the mean, smug heel, and McAfee is the underdog, scrappy babyface. That worked perfectly. Gunther winning wasn't all that shocking, I don't think. I mean, he definitely needed the win more than Pat, especially at this stage in the game. I don't know where it all leads after the fact. The little show of respect that Gunther gave Cole and McAfee afterwards was a bit peculiar. I don't know if there's much to read into with all that, but the fact that they did it should lead you to think there was a reason for it. I would suspect we'll eventually see Gunther back in the world title hunt. I'm still not fully convinced that Jay's title reign is going to last all that much longer. Do I really need to see another Gunther Jey Uso title match? Not really. But if the end result is Gunther winning the strap back, I guess I can't entirely fault the idea. And that brought us to the main event. John Cena versus Randy Orton. A match that I've seen more times than I've seen my nieces and nephews. Which is both comical and kind of depressing at the same time. There's a lot that I could potentially dissect with all this. Because it kind of depends on how deep I want to dive into the rabbit hole. It was kind of cool getting to see the old OVW footage from these two back in, what was it, 2002? I actually remember watching the very first Orton Cena match from back in the day. It's when Cena was still wearing his old prototype wrestling gear. You know, not to intentionally play devil's advocate here, I've always fallen into a similar category as a lot of the smarter fans when it comes to the Cena-Orton dynamic and that whole rivalry, if you want to call it that. WWE's tried to force the propaganda for years that Cena-Orton is this all-time great feud that compares to things like Austin Rock, Hogan Andre, Steamboat Flair. I understand from a marketing perspective, WWE wanted to try and push the narrative that Cena and Orton were the two building blocks of a previous generation of stars, along with guys like Hunter, Brock, Batista, Edge, sort of the ruthless aggression type stars that came to fame during the mid to late 2000s. I just never bought the idea that Orton versus Cena was this all-time great epic feud that stands the test of time. I mean, yeah, they wrestled a shit ton of matches over the years, but it was never in the same category as Rock Austin, Hunter Batista, or... Oh shit, now I'm blanking on all the epic rivalries of the 2000s. I wasn't watching all that religiously from like 2006 onward, so you'll have to excuse my ignorance. The point is, no matter how many times they've tried to run it back, I've seen plenty of Cena-Orton matches. I honestly can't name you offhand a single great or even memorable classic they've had together. They just, to me, never had a ton of chemistry. Despite being two guys that came up around the same time and wrestled and trained similar styles, they were both students of the OVW machine. But in the ring, I was just never blown away by their work together. I think if you're going to rank the Cena-Orton feud among all-time rivalries, you're probably looking somewhere in the ballpark of top 20, top 25. Certainly, I wouldn't rank it anywhere in the top 10 or maybe even top 15. But again, just my irrelevant opinion. Don't mind me. I'm just some asshole on the internet that sits here and gripes about pro wrestling as a hobby. When they announced this match, I didn't really know what to expect, if I'm being honest. One of the big talking points in all this was them mentioning the fact that even though we've seen countless John Cena, Randy Orton matches over the years, we've never really seen the match where the babyface heel dynamic was entirely flipped. Where Orton was going in as a crowd favorite and Cena was going in as a so-called villain. So that in and of itself was kind of interesting on paper. I mean, I wasn't expecting it to be a classic or anything, because I'm pretty much set in my ways when it comes to my opinion of watching these two wrestle. With that in mind, I also went in expecting there to be a lot of overbooked madness to it. Kind of like the WrestleMania match with Cody and Cena last month. To what extent they would go, that I wasn't so sure of. And it went about as expected. The match was very substandard. Kind of fell into the camp with a lot of Orton Cena matches where they just spam their finishes over and over again. In the case of Orton, him actually stealing Cena's AA finish at various points. At this rate, I'm pretty much trained to know that anytime Cena hits the attitude adjustment, it's not going to be the actual finish. Because everybody has to kick out of it like 3 or 4 times throughout the course of a match. The unremitting ref bump spots in main event title matches have become a laughingstock in the industry. You know, back in the day when it was a more foreign concept, you could get away with it more regularly. Now it's just a laughable trope. And they're already basically presenting you with the fact that anytime Cena's involved in a title match, this is the kind of shit you're expected to see. Constant ref bumps, constant smoke and mirror angles. I mean, is it going to eventually grow old? Probably. Especially if the finish is going to be the same lamed up crap of Cena hitting a guy in the head with a belt. I mean, it's not so different from what we used to get with Hollywood Hogan from pay-per-view matches back in the late 90s. And every single one of them was an overbooked clusterfuck with multiple NWO run-ins and copious amounts of bullshit going on. I don't expect this to be as tedious, because we already know Cena's retiring by the end of the year. And the stuff with Hogan went on for like 3 god-blessed years. But that's what the match was. If I'm trying to give it a brief overview, they did 2 table spots where Orton gave Cena the AA onto the floor. I'm still convinced the second table bump was an audible after Orton couldn't get Cena through the announce table the first time. And then he just went under the ring and grabbed a regular breakaway table and said, "This will get the job done." Again, though, they just went to the well way too much with the ref bump stuff. It eventually led to Nick Aldis and a bunch of other agents coming out. Literally so they could all just stand there while Orton gave them all RKOs one by one. Which is always hilarious no matter how many times I see it. They all just single file and stand waiting to get dropped. The other critical moment here was when R-Truth came out at the very end and got Randy to hold back from punting Cena in the head. They've apparently been doing something on television with R-Truth where he's been putting over Cena as the last real champion, kind of alluding to some type of heel turn without being super overt about it. I mean, at first it seemed like they were going in the direction of maybe having Truth join up with Cena, which maybe could have been interesting. But now I'm hearing they shot an angle during the post-match press scrum where Cena attacked Truth and put him through the table or something. So I guess they're not running with that original idea. But when you boil it down, Truth was basically the deciding factor in turning the match in Cena's favor, because it gave Cena enough time to recover and low blow Orton. Then he clocked him in the head with a belt and pinned him. I don't know. In the pantheon of Cena-Orton matches, I mean, this definitely wasn't among the worst I've seen. The bar was never set all that high to begin with, but it was fine. That's my general takeaway. It was better than Cody Cena. Again, very low bar. They really didn't give you much indication on what Cena's next program is going to be, outside of potential of a one and done with R-Truth, which is something that seems more slated for them to do on television rather than a PLE. Still no mention of Cody. I don't know what his status is right now. I think they might be trying to intentionally keep him off television because of all the uncertainty with fan reactions. Maybe they're hoping that by keeping him away for a while, some of that stain will go away. And let's be honest too, it's no disrespect to Cody, but do they really need him back immediately? I don't think so. Because what would you have him do if he's not going to immediately go after Cena again? I don't know. I mean, there's ways you could definitely incorporate him onto the show, just it would seem a little awkward at first. Now, they did announce that Punk is coming back soon, so they might be immediately launching right into Cena and Punk as the next title program. I mean, we're obviously going to get that feud at some point. I think some people were expecting it to come at SummerSlam, but maybe not. Maybe they'll try to do a Money in the Bank type deal. Yeah, I mentioned at the top how I didn't really have a whole lot to say about the show. I still basically spent an hour talking about it. But I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. At the same time, I don't know if that was a result of extremely low expectations or if the event was actually that good to begin with. 5 matches wasn't a lot, but it still wound up running almost 3 hours when all was said and done. I definitely prefer this format of booking over the 2-night slogs where they have like 8 or 9 matches and it just seems interminable. Still not really digging the Cena heel run. I figured that was going to be the case from the onset, but yeah, they really haven't done much in helping to shift my view on that. Hopefully by getting Punk in there to spice things up, at least the promo exchanges will be worth watching. But that was Backlash. And now we're going to lash out on WWF Retro Raw from 1996. And on this week's soap opera series, Shawn Michaels, the Homewrecker and Womanizer, No, we also had a little bit of wrestling sprinkled in there. But after everything we saw last week with Michaels and Davey Boy and that Oscar-winning performance from Diana Smith, WWF Raw has now become the off-brand Lifetime movie network. How long ago was it that I brought up the fact that this was around the time Russo came in and started having influence on the booking team? You think that's coincidence? The fact that all of a sudden they're running with this ridiculous story of Shawn going around trying to sleep with Davey's wife in a poor attempt at giving their feud some kind of backstory. We all know Russo's forte. The Jerry Springer approach when it came to writing television. Because that's what he was. If you tried to claim Russo as a booker, he'd scoff at that. Nah, he was a television writer, bro. He wrote television scripts for this fake wrestling product that everybody watches weekly. I'm not trying to intimate that Russo was the creative mind that came up with everything we're seeing in this WWF title picture right now. All I'm saying is that the track record of Russo's booking philosophy is ever present right now. The only thing missing is all the half-naked women calling each other skanks and whores every week. That and pole matches. You know who was perfectly suited for the pole? Was Sable. I know that was awful, but I had to say it. Yeah, she was out there at ringside while Mark Romero wrestled the 1-2-3 Kid. The very first thing I wrote here is that Sable's arms are bigger than Sean Waltman's. She also had more muscle definition in her back than Sean did in his entire body. I think Sean still had her beat on personality, though. Hunter was also on commentary. God help us all. He's still talking in that fake blue blood accent. I think it's actually kind of turned into a Lana situation now. Y'all remember back when Lana used to talk in the fake Bulgarian accent for all of Miro's segments? And like one day she just dropped the gimmick from out of the blue and started talking like her normal self. And they never drew attention to it. That's how it is with Hunter and the British accent. It comes and goes now. Sometimes you'll hear him attempt it, and then he'll just go back to speaking like his regular self. It's hilarious. The match was generally unspectacular, but it wasn't bad. Other than the hideously long chinlock sequence. Mark Romero was always one of those guys. To me, it never mattered how flashy he tried to be. Didn't matter how much he tried to look crazy or out of control. He just never did anything for me growing up. I think I briefly touched on that when we saw his debut at WrestleMania. He was always boring to me. And everything about him looked so phony. He was a really good athlete with a great body. But his personality was blech. Now, he and Sable were the perfect match for each other. I'll say that much. But the match ends with Hunter trying to crotch Mero when he goes up top. Then after the Kid tried to give him a superplex, Mero turned it around and landed on Waltman for the pin. Waltman at this point is pretty much in a similar boat as Nash and Hall. Little bit of a different story, though, because he didn't directly leave for WCW when those two did. I think he stuck around through... Actually, no, he left before the summer of 96. But he didn't actually debut on Nitro until sometime in the fall. I don't remember what the full story was, but I know he's about to leave the WWF pretty soon. So kind of like what we saw with Razor and Diesel at the In Your House pay-per-view, Vince is pretty much using the kid as enhancement fodder now. He is growing out his goatee to get more of that classic X-Pac look. But that is, it's kind of where we're at with the Clique members. Minus Hunter and Shawn. 3 members of the Pack are about to leave. One is still floundering around with a rotten gimmick and undercard feuds. And the other is the WWF champion. And all the while, they're still finger-fucking around trying to figure out what to do with Steve Austin. The best we're getting right now is a Caribbean strap match with him and Savio Vega. And now there's a stipulation that DiBiase once added, where if Savio loses, he has to become DiBiase's personal chauffeur. Which, ought to ruffle some feathers with the social justice warrior crew. The Puerto Rican having to serve as the American's flunky. I'm sure that never even crossed their minds. I like how that's not even the real stipulation. The literal stipulation is that Savio, if he loses, basically has to become DiBiase's Uber driver. Wow. But let's talk about this absolutely preposterous clip where some anonymous woman tried to hashtag MeTooHBK for a couple minutes. Talking about how Shawn is a horrible person and a woman abuser. I can't believe I'm actually going to spend time talking about this. So it's supposed to be one of those deals where some woman is telling a one-sided version of the kind of man that Shawn is. And it's a silhouette figure because she doesn't want to give away her true identity. There's just a screen cap at the bottom that reads, ex-wife of former professional wrestler. And out of curiosity, I went ahead and looked it up to see if Shawn actually had a legal spouse prior to his now wife, who I'm pretty sure they're still married. But it is true. Shawn had a previous first relationship that began in 1988, and the marriage ended in, I believe, 1994. Apparently her name was Teresa Wood. And when they had shot the original clip at the beginning in the cold open, I was expecting this to be the real Teresa, whoever this silhouetted woman was. That is apparently not who this was supposed to be. It was an ex-wife of another former professional wrestler who we never actually found out. They censored the name. It vaguely sounded like she was saying Jimmy Snuka. And I was like, wait, what? I don't know who it was supposed to be. If I actually cared enough to read more into it and deep dive into the ring rats that Shawn may have been shaboinking from back in the day, I could probably narrow it down to a few names. But it's pretty much every generic sob story you've ever heard alpha widows preach about on TikTok. They meet some really smoking hot Giga Chad. She's married to somebody that she doesn't really have any sexual interest in. So the good-looking dude manages to swoon her into bed. She claims it's great sex. And then after realizing the guy doesn't want anything more than the sex, he bails. And then she instantly regrets it and tries to pull the toxic masculinity card. And blames the hot guy for being the cause of all her emotional trauma. Even though she's the dumb broad that decided to sleep with the fucking guy in the first place. It's a tale as old as time. Well, that was pretty much her story in a nutshell. Whoever this woman was, Shawn got her to sleep with him because he's really hot and gave her the tingles. And once she realized Shawn didn't want anything more than a little bedroom fun, she got mad. Now she's trying to claim Shawn's a womanizer and takes advantage of innocent women. And because every rational-minded man knows how female psychology works in 2025, mostly thanks to the internet and social media, and women just kind of generally exposing themselves, there's no way anybody sees Shawn as the bad guy in this situation, right? It's actually a very clever way to get even the HBK haters to support him. I was no Shawn Michaels fan from back in the day, you all know that. But I heard this woman here and I was like, yeah, having not heard Shawn's side of the story yet, I'm more inclined to believe Shawn is the innocent party here. If you really loved your husband that much, you wouldn't have been as easily seduced. That's on you, lady. Sorry. I still am kind of curious if this is supposed to be some generic ring rat or if it was an actual reference to somebody in particular. Maybe someone can clue me in. But that all led to this British Bulldog versus Fatu match. As soon as I saw Cornette come out here with Diana, my first thought was, especially after seeing that pre-tape with a woman, at least you didn't call Shawn a fornicator. I still don't entirely get the purpose of why Diana had to be out in Davy's corner. I mean, I understand the logic of them using her as a building block to get over the story with Shawn from the other week. But having her out there in Davy's corner, to do what? Stand there emotionless and look confused the entire time? She had nothing. Cornette was the one taking all the manager bumps at the end. I honestly didn't write a whole lot down about the action. Bulldog hit Fatu with a power slam and won. It looked more like a Dr. Death Oklahoma stampede than a regular running power slam. I mean, the one cool thing we got to see here was the cameo debut for Rosie and Jamal. They were kind of in the aisleway looking on at one point. Never got physically involved, but, you know, Vince put him over and talked about them being members of the Onawa family. I think they were originally brought in and sent to the former WWF Developmental Center that they were partnered with at the time. What was the Cincinnati-based company? Fuck. Now I can't remember what it was called. It was run by Les Thatcher. But they wrestled down there for several years before they came back in the mid-2000s and did the 3-minute warning thing with Rico Constantino, which I thought was a really cool group. Wish the WWF would have done more with them. All right, somebody help me out here. When the hell did the Body Donnas turn babyface? Was it around the same time they started selling all that Sunny merchandise and figured, fuck it, she looks good on a t-shirt. No need to force the fans to keep booing her. I don't know. They wrestled Techno Team 2000. It was bad. More accurately, Eric Watts was bad. Put it this way. The simple fact that the Body Donnas were wrestling Techno Team 2000 in this segment, and they were still both considerably more cold than the New Rockers, that is saying something. I like how they're trying to do a twin magic deal with Al Snow and Marty Jannetty, as if those two look anything remotely alike. But apparently it's all part of some intricate WWF incompetent officiating story they're doing. They have fucking Harvey Whippleman going around taking notes on all the WWF referees, testing to make sure they're not stupid, blind, and deaf. Why don't I remember like any of this shit ever happening? This is all foreign to me. Stuff that I totally blocked out from memory. By the way, they showed a split screen where the Rockers were watching this match from a monitor. I'm totally convinced that Jannetty was high. I probably should have been high watching this match. It was so excruciating. The Body Donnas worked over Watts forever. Then the Techno Brothers got a cold tag and ran wild for about 5 seconds before they got cut off and finished with a weird combo move from Dr. Tom and Candido. And by weird, I mean Candido gave Troy a body slam, and then Dr. Tom came off the top rope with the double axe, even though Troy was still laying flat on his back. So it was more like a seated double axe. Whatever it was supposed to be, it got the job done. I'm not in any way, shape, or form looking forward to the Body Donnas versus the New Rockers on pay-per-view, but hey, if Sonny's going to be there, guess it all can't be bad. Because you know what they say. It's always sunny in Philadelphia. Even though I'm pretty sure the next In Your House takes place in like North Carolina or something. That was a very poor attempt at humor. And then we had the best part of the entire show. It was a 60-second pre-tape promo where Jim Cornette put over Vader in the locker room. They talked about the Yokozuna angle from a couple weeks back. JC said that Yoko may be coming back, but he won't be at 100%. And Vader's going to finish what he started on Raw and put him out of commission for good. They also plugged a match for next week between Vader and Duke the Dumpster. He made it sound a lot more compelling than it does on paper. But with that, let's talk about the TV main event. A very confusing main event. It's Owen Hart versus The Undertaker. Last week we talked about them immediately moving on from Goldust's feud with the Ultimate Warrior over the Intercontinental Belt. At the same time, they're also taking a temporary detour when it comes to the Undertaker-Mankind feud. Somehow the decision was made in the last week. The Undertaker and Goldust not only are going to feud for the IC title, but it's also going to be a casket match. Why? Why not? They may as well have just outright said, yeah, Mankind's going to show up and fuck over The Undertaker. In more ways than Goldust wanted to fuck The Undertaker over. if you know what I mean. So here's the confusing part. They have Goldust show up to do commentary. He's got a signature gold headset, which I got a kick out of. And, well, first, he hears the news that the match with Taker is going to be a casket match. And he immediately starts freaking out because he's deathly afraid of coffins. He wants nothing to do with that match. And then as he tries to leave with Marlena, he gets spooked when they play Taker's theme music and he comes out for the match. So, the story it would seem they're trying to get over is that Goldust is very much afraid of The Undertaker. Pretty self-explanatory. But then it gets really complex. At some point while the match is going on, as Taker's working over Owen and beating on him, Goldust immediately flips a switch and he starts getting all weird and creepy, talking about how big, strong, and tall The Undertaker is, how he wants to fondle Taker's urn, or something to that extent. So he goes from total fear and trepidation to, I now have the hots for this guy in a matter of seconds. Which doesn't really make any sense, but okay, we'll roll with it. So as Owen's going after Taker's knee, you see Goldust start stalking Paul Bearer and attempting to undress him by pinning him against the ring post to unbutton his tie. And this blatant harassment attempt ends with Paul running off to the back, crying like a 5-year-old who accidentally fell off the monkey bars. And, well, eventually Taker goozles Owen and dumps him out to the floor, wherein we see Goldust attempt to help Owen back into the ring, but not before grabbing his ass and giving him a nice squeeze. He was feeling them Liv Morgan cakes, if you know what I'm saying. And so, obviously, Owen was distracted by that. So Taker grabbed him by the neck. He pulled Owen over the top so he could hit him with a tombstone for the pin. And then Goldust licked his chops and rubbed himself while Paul Bearer rolled a casket down to ringside. I'm not making that shit up. That all happened. It was quite bizarre. Not to try and steal Goldust's gimmick. I do not understand the logic of Goldust being initially afraid of The Undertaker, but then somehow becomes obsessed with him in the same segment. Is that a gay stereotype that I'm not catching on to? I mean, whatever the case, it's pretty easy to see where it's all going. I did kind of gloss over that this is the first time we saw Taker back since Mankind put him in the claw hold a few weeks ago. It's an interesting way of skewing the fans away from the Taker Foley stuff while they're doing this intermediary thing with him and Goldust. But, I mean, not entirely unforeseen what the end game is. Unpredictability is not always a bad thing. But yeah, that was Raw. It was a show. Not a terrible one, but wouldn't say I necessarily enjoyed it. But on that note, I guess we can wrap everything up there and prepare for another Friday show, where I will actually be able to record from my own room. So that'll be nice. I can scream to the top of my lungs and not have to worry about neighbors. Because you all know me. I'm just a loudmouth son of a bitch. I love sitting here and screaming into a hot mic and blowing everybody's eardrums out. But I think that's it for now. So, hope everybody has a good week, and we'll catch y'all on Friday for the next installment of the show. Take care, everybody. Peace out.